I would like to open up this meeting with a verse from the Moorish Holy Quran. And I actually want to pull from a verse from the Passion text. And this is something that I really want us to remember when we talk about, or when we promote this Moorish Divine and National Movement. It's important that we use this proverbial hammer, because it's important. It's very easy for us to lose sight of this when we are engaging with our brother or our sisters on a day-to-day basis. We have to remember that man, spirit man, is a part of Allah. And we have to remember that when man, he honors thy Father God Allah. What man does for man, he does for Allah. And when man, he harms thy Father God Allah. Islam? And I will be pulling this verse from the Passion text, also known as the Holy Bible, from 1 John chapter 4, verse 20. And it says, if a man say, I love God Allah, or Father God Allah, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God or Allah whom he hath not seen? Islam? So when we talk about this principle of love, again, I cannot stress enough, it is not just the actions of a person that defines what love is. It is your mindset, it is your psychology, it is your frame of mind towards that brother or that sister. And before you can love anyone else, you have to love yourself. So lately I've been teaching and I've been demonstrating from the first few chapters of the Moorish Holy Quran, and it is for good reason. The reason is that we have to embed in ourselves the core principles, the very first lessons and holy instructions that our holy and divine prophet Noble Ali has left for us to learn. And that is, know thyself and thy Father God Allah. When you know thyself and thy Father God Allah, you know who you are. And if you know who you are, you have the ability to love yourself. You are you understand your personalities, your nature of what, and inshallah, you know your purpose. So with that, you can begin to invest in yourself. And if you can begin to invest in yourself, that's when you start to establish that quality of character as a Moorish American. Investing in yourself is understanding and studying your foremothers and your forefathers, knowing their mistakes, understanding their triumphs as well as their transgressions, and learning from them and adapting them and applying them. This is how we establish that quality of character. This is how we establish the value and love for yourself. And then when we can identify that we have love for ourselves, we can see the principles or the potential of your next man, or your sister, your brother man or your sister man, if you will. Y'all understand that you have a full grasp of that. So what we want to understand, or what we want to realize, is that we engage with different levels of ourselves every day. Me talking to you right now, I'm engaging with a reflection of myself. It states in the Moorish Holy Quran that reflection is the business of man. The sense of his state is his first priority. So if I'm engaging with you, brother, or if I'm engaging with you, sister, I'm dealing with a reflection or an attribute of myself that I see in myself. Whether or not I acknowledge it, whether or not I despise it, whether I favor it, I'm dealing with myself. So in that, sword sharpens sword, iron sharpens iron. We receive and confer reciprocal helps and mutual obligations. We do for ourselves. We do for others for what we want to, and such as we do for ourselves as well. Islam? These are a part of the principles that we have to exercise and adapt and practice every day. It's important for us as Moorish Americans that we continue to be friends and servants of humanity. And in order for us to be friends and servants to humanity, we have to be friends and servants to ourselves. We must know what we put in our bodies, both mentally and physically. We must make sure that we are astute in the studies of our holy and divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali, so we can continue to develop this Moorish American paradigm. And then ultimately, we have to manifest what our thoughts are, what our prophet Noble Drew Ali has instructed us to do. And that is to promote this Moorish and divine and national movement. It is for us to be industrious. It's for us to teach those things, as I said when I opened up this meeting, that make us better citizens. Islam. And in order for us to do that, it's important that we practice the very first principle out of our 5 divine principles that are known to man, which is love. Islam. Last Holy Day, I spoke about understanding and comprehending the 5 highest principles that are known to man, which are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I explained in detail from our Lieutenant Grand Governor what those principles meant according to our doctrine of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Where can we find examples of these principles in the doctrine of the Moorish Science Temple of America? Today, I want to continue this lesson by speaking about the higher and the lower self, and I want to discuss the principles of the lower self. I want to begin with a verse from my Moorish Holy Quran, drawing from chapter 3. And I'll be reading verses 5 through 12. And it reads, there are 2 selves, the higher self and the lower self. The higher self is human spirit, clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. The lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires, is a reflection of a higher self, distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. The lower self is an illusion and will pass away. The higher self is Allah in man and will not pass away. The higher self is the embodiment of truth. The lower self is truth reversed, and so is falsehood manifest. The higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right, and the lower self is what the higher self is not. The lower self breeds hatred, slander, murder, hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. The higher self is the mother of all virtues and the harmonies of life. The lower self is rich in promises, but poor in blessedness and peace. It offers pleasure, joy, and satisfying gain, but gives unrest, misery, and death. What I would like to discuss briefly, Sister Secretary had mentioned in her measure, is that it is incumbent upon man and woman on the plane of manifest to conquer the higher and the lower self. It reads in our Moorish American doctrine that we are to conquer these two selves. They cannot, in the plane of manifest, even though it is an illusion, it is still a part of us. Therefore, we cannot fully stomp it out until we have reached that deific life and the great God Allah calls us onto the plane of soul. Islam? So while we are on this plane of manifest, which is an illusion, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to first master the higher and lower self for ourselves, for us as individuals. And when we have mastered it or came towards this, towards the point of mastering, this is when we should be teaching others how to master this higher and this lower self. Islam? The higher self, as stated, is human spirit clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. And as myself and the Sister Secretary has expressed and has demonstrated earlier, is that Allah and man are one. And in our doctrine it even states that the nearest place to meet Allah is in the heart. And it says in the Quran of Mecca that Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. And it also says in the Moorish American doctrine, in the Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America, that to serve Allah is to serve man, or vice versa. So again, we have to, it is our responsibility to be friends and servants of humanity. It is our responsibility as Moorish Americans, in order for us to reach this mastery of the higher self, continue to be about your Father's business. Continue to do the great God Allah's work. Islam? In that you will receive justice, which is the reward from Allah, which is the progress and the blessings of Allah. Or you can breed in the lower self. And we know that breeding in the lower self brings hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. And for that you would receive your reward from Allah, which will be everything that will cause you to rest. Moorish Science Temple of America, the goal of the Moorish Science Temple of America is to uplift fallen humanity. And the Prophet says, and our doctrine states that how did the Prophet begin to uplift fallen humanity? And the answer is by teaching us to be ourselves. The purpose of the Moorish Science Temple of America is to remove the marks of Negro, Black, and colors from the Asiatics that inhabit North America. Is to return to them their nationality and divine creed, which is Moorish American in Islamism. And with that, we will be able to regain our lost estate. I give honors to our Lieutenant Grand Governor for his measures for the past couple of weeks, because it has inspired me, because it's a reminder of what my responsibility is as man, as a part of Allah. He mentioned that Allah is the Lord of the plane of manifest. And it's mentioned not just in the Moorish Holy Quran, but it's mentioned in all of the scriptures that were revealed to man. It says in the Quran of Mecca, in the degree of Muhammad, that man was made to be the Khalifa, the ruler of the plane of manifest, of this earth land, if you will, over plant, beast, and every creepy crawly thing. It is said even in the Piscean text that man is Lord of the world, of plant, beast, protoplast, creepy crawly thing. So that is our estate. That is our ownership. And we have lost the rights to that ownership when we begin to debase ourselves from Allah, when we begin to demonstrate a more carnal nature, or give in to our Lord or our carnal nature. It's one thing to have knowledge of the lower self and to understand the lower self, and then it's another thing to have it consume you. Islam, family? So we have to be masters of all that we survey. We have to be the Lord of this realm. We have to be the Lord of ourselves. Our sister secretary stated that sin is anything that deludes to slavery. So we can, and that is reference to slavery not just on the outside, but it's also internal. So when you are slave to things that are not promoting goodwill to yourself and to your brother or sister, you're committing sin. Islam? If we are not in every waking moment of our lives striving to be better people and to be the message that we bring and to define ourselves as a nation of people in these United States of America, then we are in sin. We are in slavery. We have to command our birthright. We have to command our divine right. We have to command our lost estate. How do we do that? Is the question. Well, first, and the answer is easy. Complexity is overrated, as they say. We first start off by demonstrating the highest principles that are known to man, which are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam? Just those 5 principles alone, and exercising those virtues alone, you will begin to see a change in your spirit. You will begin to see a change in your mind, which will affect your body and will affect how you interact and engage with your brother and your sister and with the rest of society, because you're going to want better. And if you want better, you will do better. Islam? That is the highest self. We come to our holy day meetings so we can reconnect with Allah as a collective. Because as of right now, the state of the Moorish Americans, we are scattered. We are we are fractured, if you will. So it is good health to come together and to absorb this energy from one another, to help one another, to discuss the happenings of the Moorish Americans in Temple number 19 and as well as abroad. That should give you strength. That should give you inspiration. That should give you the energy needed to go back when you separate into the world, to go back into the cares of the world. This is why we have our holy day meetings, so we can build in concentration on the things that will again make us better citizens, that will bring us closer to that deific life, so we can live through purity and love. Islam? The lower self is what the higher self is not. What does that mean? You know, as I said before, when we talk about the lower self, we should be talking about the lower self in degrees. We have the lower self, which is knowledge of all things that are on the plane of manifest. And then we have another level of the lower self that will breed, as I mentioned before, hatred, slander, murder, lewdness, theft, and everything that harms. It will cause misery. Again, we have 5 higher principles. And so being that we have a higher and a lower self, being that we are on the plane of manifest, we're on a plane that demonstrates duality. So if we have a higher and a lower self, and if we have the highest principles that are known to man, which are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, then we also have the lower principles that should be known to man. Islam, family?
Islam.
Those principles are instability, inconstancy, weakness, insufficiency of knowledge, and misery. I want to say that again, family.
I'm sorry, Sheik.
The 5 lowest principles that are known to man, or that should be known to man, are instability, or the instability of man, inconstancy, weakness, insufficiency of knowledge, and misery. Those low principles that breed with the lower self will cause harm, will bring us into slavery, which will be an act of sin. These things we must avoid. But in order to avoid a thing, we must know of a thing. And once we know of a thing, we should understand, we will have an understanding of it. Islam, family?
Islam, Sheik.
So we're going to talk a little bit about it, these 5 principles, and not to burden the family, I'm just going to read actually the first 5 verses of each of these chapters, because these low principles, or lower principles rather, are in the Moorish American Quran. Islam?
Islam.
So we're going to start off with the first principle. Instability. Holy instruction from the Prophet, the instability of man. Inconstancy is powerful in the heart of man. Intemperance swayeth it whither it will. Despair engrosseth much of it, and fear proclaimeth, behold, I sit unrivaled therein. But vanity is beyond them all. Weep not therefore at the calamities of the human state, rather laugh at its follies. In the hands of the man addicted to vanity, life then is but the shadow of a dream. The hero, the most renowned of the human character, what is he but the bubble of his weakness? The public is unstable and ungrateful. Why should the man of wisdom endanger himself for fools?
Islam, Sheik.
The man who neglecteth his present concerns to revolve how he will behave when greater, feedeth himself with wind, while his bread is eaten by another. Act as becometh thee in thy present station, and in more exalted ones thy face shall not be ashamed. Islam?
Islam, Sheik.
It is said that good people wake up every day with the intentions of draining the ocean with a ladle. Islam?
Islam.
We as vanguards of the Asiatic nation, we as friends and servants of humanity, we have a daunting task to teach those things that make us better citizens. To teach our people their nationality and their divine creed.
Come on, Sheik.
That they may know that they are part and partial. But our prophet is giving us instructions on how to engage with these people. He's giving us the ailments of our people, because we have the remedy. But we also, as doctors of the law, as some would say, we have to also examine the conditions of our people. We have to give a prognosis.
That's right.
It says that of wisdom and understanding is the gnosis of the lower self.
That's what I said.
So in order for us to do that, we have to understand what are the concepts of the lower self. What is it that breeds the things that harm our society, us as Asiatics? And one of these elements is inconstancy. It is the thing that is not constant. It is the thing that is not frequent, if you will. Our sister secretary has stated in the misery of the holy ministry, of death, that a man needs a pattern in their lives.
That's right.
So, if we need a pattern in our lives, that is injected into our psyche so that we may remove ourselves from inconstancy. This is why we have religion. This is why we have ceremony and form, to remind us of our higher self. You know, I'll be frank with you. I am not a fan of our brothers and sisters stating that they are just spiritual. Why is that? Because just stating that you're spiritual, first and foremost, you're using it out of context. Because stating that you're spiritual is that you're stating that you recognize that there's a higher source, or you recognize that you should have a connection with a higher being, regardless of what you may call him. But you choose not to engage with the divine. That is really not called spiritual. That's called being agnostic. Because that's what agnostics do. Agnostics are waverly in that context. They recognize that there's a quote-unquote divine, but in their mind, based on their engagement with people and based on their living, they believe that it has nothing to do with the current condition that they're in. That's what you are if you're stating that you're quote-unquote spiritual, but you're not engaging in ceremony and form to bring yourself closer to that divine. You don't have a set pattern. You're practicing a form of inconstancy. And you wonder why you're not closer to the great God Allah. Or you're wondering why you're not closer to the divine, or whatever you may call him. Islam?
Islam, Sheik.
Religion brings us back into the fold. Religion gives us discipline. Religion gives us a reminder that we are working for a higher cause, for a higher purpose other than ourselves. It reminds us that even though we have an internal struggle, we should also acknowledge the external struggle. And contrary to popular belief, when you begin to solve that external struggle, you will begin to solve that internal struggle. Islam, family?
Islam, Sheik.
Inconstancy, or the instability of man. The next element is inconstancy. And it reads, and this is chapter 41, by the way. Nature urges thee to inconstancy, O man. Therefore guard thyself at all times against it. Thou art from the womb of thy mother, various and wavering. From the loins of thy father inheriteth thou instability. how then shalt thou be firm? Those who give thee a body furnish thee with weakness, but he who gave thee a soul arm thee with resolution. Employ it, and thou art wise, be wise, and thou art happy. Let him who doeth well beware how he boasteth of it.
That's right.
For rarely is it of his own will. Islam? So inconstancy and instability run hand in hand. We are unstable because we are unstable, or we are unstable rather because we are inconstant. We have to have a firm foundation. And that firm foundation is flat. There are no ridges. We have a foundation as Moorish Americans. But as Negro, black, and colored, as those that are only 3/4 human, those that are considered but an illusion, those that are considered colored, tarnished, stained, or varnished, they have no instability, or they have no instability because there's nothing that's constant in their lives. And that things are inconstant because we are reactionary people. We're not proactive. Something goes on in our neighborhoods, then we react to it. And sometimes we don't even want to react to it because it's what Chris Rock say. They ain't talking about me, or it's not of my concern. But little do you know, you are not this box. You are not within. You do not. It is not for you to live within the confines of the four walls of your home. You have to go out there into the cares of the world. We, even as Moorish Americans, we cannot stay on the shores of foundation. We have to go out into the cares of the world, into the dunya, and bring our people back onto the shores of foundation. So they can reach their higher selves. So they can reach that deific life. Islam? I want to focus on verse 4. This is the one that stood out to me. It says, let him who doeth well beware of how he boasteth of it, for rarely is it of his own will. Do not let your success go to your head. And do not let your failures go to your heart. Islam? We in the Moorish Science Temple of America, or the perception of coming into the Moorish Science Temple of America is that you're coming into a institution that does not need any input, that does not need to be continuously built up. So we come in expecting only to absorb the knowledge for our own feel good. But where does the application of the wisdom that you receive come into play? It says in our Moorish Holy Quran that when ye separate into the world, remember the relation that bindeth you to love and unity. All right? So that relationship is love. That relationship is being a spirit and part of Allah. So do you remember that when you separate into the world, when you go back into the cares of the world? Or do you go back to despising and being agitated at your brother or sister that is only a reflection of yourself? That's the only reason that Allah has put him in, or put him or her in your path. There are no strange happenings. Law governs all events. They're putting it's in your path because Allah wants you to look at yourself. Look at what you could be. Look at what you may become. And you may even have the ability to bring that brother or sister out of this form of inconstancy. Islam?
Islam, Sheikh.
The next element of the lower self is weakness, and that's found on chapter 42. And it reads, vain and inconstant as thou art, O child of imperfection, how canst thou be weak? Is it not inconstancy connected with frailty? Can there be vanity without infirmity? Avoid the danger of the one, and thou shalt escape the mischiefs of the other. Islam? Let me stop right there, because the prophet was a wise man.
Islam.
Prophet was a mastermind. Islam? Because even in the chapter alone, he's letting you know that there's a pattern. Because he's saying that the very elements that bring about weakness are the very elements that we have just discussed. Inconstancy and instability. It brings about an infirmity. And we're still talking about establishing a foundation. The prophet says that we are supposed to be built on the impregnable doctrine of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We are supposed to have a foundation. But there will be penetration of this organization, of this Moorish Divine and National Movement, if there is inconstancy.
That's right.
There will be people or the schemers coming in, the smelly culprits coming in.
That's right.
If there's instability.
That's right.
There will be deceivers if there are people that demonstrate weakness into this movement. Prophet said, Moors are men upright, independent, and fearless. It's important that we practice engaging or interacting with fear.
That's right.
Fear is but an illusion. We have a fear of whether or not we will succeed. We have a fear of whether or not the girl that we see across the way is going to talk to us if we approach her. We have a fear of flying. We have a fear of jumping out of planes. We have fears of the unknown. We have so many. But that is only in your mind.
That's right.
It's only in your psyche. Some would call it or refer to it as European psychology.
That's what it is.
Some would say you even fear yourself. How is that? That man put a mighty work. He put a work in on this morning.
That's right. Yes, he did.
That brings about weakness.
Come on, brother.
That brings about instability. That brings about inconstancy. And how are we being guiders of our nation? How are we to demonstrate weakness? How are we to exhibit strength when we don't have clear conception of a foundation, of the foundation that was brought to us? Islam?
Islam.
Let me continue on. Verse 2 reads, Wherein art thou most weak? In wherein thou seemest most strong? In that wherein most thou glorieth? Even in possessing the things which thou hast, in using the good that is about thee. Art not thy desires also frail? Or knowest thou even what it is thou wouldest wish? When thou hast obtained what most thou soughtest after, behold, it contenteth thee not. Therefore loseth the pleasure that is before thee its relish. And why appeareth that which is yet to come to the sweeter? Because thou art wearied with the good of this, because thou knowest not the evil of that which is not with thee, know that to be content is to be happy. Couldst thou choose for thyself, would thou creator lay before thee all that thy heart could ask for? Would happiness then remain within thee? Or would joy always dwell in thy gates? So when we talk about weakness, we're talking about what we're compensating for as individuals. So again, we are lords of this plane of manifest, and being that we're lords of the plane of manifest, it is the nature of the thing that we pursue sustenance, whether it be food, clothing, shelter, thorns, industry, what have you. But as it says in this demonstration, these are not the things that should make you content. These are the things that should not make you happy. Our Sheik's secretary has spoken about this earlier when it says, when we talk about the science of happiness or how to attain happiness, is again loving your brother and sister and doing the will of Allah. You will receive the reward from Allah, but remember that your work is not done. So do not be content once you start to receive the rewards from Allah, because that which you will receive will be taken away. Islam? So continue to do Allah's will. Continue to be friends and servants of humanity, and you will continue to be happy. Islam? The fourth element of the Lord's self is the insufficiency of knowledge. How can you have the insufficiency of knowledge? Well, we will talk about it. It reads, if there is anything lovely, if there is anything desirable, if there is anything within the reach of man that is worthy of praise, is it not knowledge? And yet, who is it that attaineth it? The statesman proclaimeth that he hath it. The ruler of the people claimeth the praise of it, but findeth the subject that he possesseth it. Evil is not requisite to man, neither can vice be necessary to be tolerated. Yet how many evils are permitted by the connivance of the law? How many crimes committed by the decree of the council? But be wise, O ruler, and learn, O thou that are to command the nations. One crime authorized by thee is worse than the escape of 10 from punishment. When the people are numerous, when thy sons increase about thy table, sendest thou not to slay the innocent, and to fall before the sword of whom they have not offended. Islam?
Sheikh.
The insufficiency of knowledge is the folly of the application of the wisdom. I know that I use a whole lot of words, but simply put, it is the misuse of the wisdom that you have received. It is the misuse of the information that you have received. It is the misusage of the title that you have been rewarded. Islam? It says in one of the great scriptures of Marvel Comics, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Islam family? So with having knowledge, it is imperative that we exercise it in genuine nature. We cannot abuse it. We cannot be those of the connivance of the law. We cannot be those that are to be considered the kafirs, or the concealers of the truth, or the concealers of the light. Why is that? Because our prophet decreed us to be what? Revealers of the light. Islam? So in that, there's a responsibility. There's a responsibility in the information that we receive. It says, teach it to the ignorant for thine own, or teach it to the ignorant for their wisdom, and teach it to the wise for thine own understanding. Paraphrasing. But it's important that we use the knowledge that is given to us for the good of the people and not just for the benefit of ourselves. Islam? The fifth and the final element of the Lord's self is misery. We have a tendency to be miserable. We have a tendency to loathe in our own dissatisfaction for ourselves. As I said before, do not take your mistakes to heart. If you make a mistake and you're still living and breathing and you have full cognizance of what you are still claiming to do, get over it. Do not dwell in misery. Do not dwell in self-loathing of yourself. You have a mighty work to do. That is what our Sheik's secretary had talked about. When we talk about the ministry of death, we're talking about not just the physical death, we're talking about the spiritual death. We're talking about the psychological death. We're talking about misery. We're talking about the fact that you can't raise yourself up. That's why the degree of Jesus is important, because he talks about the degree of resurrection. He talks about the degree of redemption. He speaks upon the degree of love. He speaks upon the degree of knowing that the things that he has demonstrated, you have the power to do as well. Why? Because you are also man, which is the spirit and part of Allah. But let me continue on to this passage. It reads, verse 1, feeble and insufficient, there's that word again, as thou art, O man, in good, frail and inconsistent, as thou art in pleasure. Yet there is a thing in which thou art strong and unshaken. Its name is misery. It is the character of thy being, the prerogative of thy nature. In thy breast alone it resideth. Without thee there is nothing of it. And behold, what is its source but thy own passions? Islam? In the degree of Buddha, it talks about what causes suffering. And what causes suffering is the act of your passion. It's this desire. It's what you crave. Islam? It's one thing to want a vehicle for mobility so you can be industrious. But it's a one thing to desire it to the point where you lose when you lose yourself over it. See, again, wisdom is the gnosis of the lower self, the things that are illusion that will pass away. So the things that we desire, we have to understand that these are but illusions. These are just baubles, if you will. These are tools that we use for our progression in this walk of life. When we go through these 12 steps. Islam? So it is not for us to dwell in the loss of our passions. We can speak with convictions, but we have to understand that our passions alone are but our own, and that it is not make us who we are. It is the works and deeds that make us who we are. Islam? It continues on in verse 3. He who gave thee these, gave thee also reason to subdue them. Exert it, and thou shalt trample them under thy feet. Thine entrance into the world, thou entrance into the world, is it not shameful? Thy destruction, is it not glorious? Lo, men adore the instruments of death with gold and gems, and wear them above their garments. He who begetteth man hideth his face, but he who killeth 1,000 is honored. Islam? Wanting or desiring or craving things that will eventually pass away will cause you misery. Things or being in a state where you are considered undesirable and considered what is the word I want to use? expendable, will cause you misery. Why is that? Because you will interact with people who do not see your vision, who do not see your worth. And if people don't see your worth, then they're going to treat you as if you're worthless. Islam?
Wow.
So, again, this concept of nationality, this concept of being a Moorish American, of establishing this quality of character, giving us the power to define, it gives us also the power to reclaim our lost estate, to reclaim our rulership over all that you can see. Again, I give honors to our Lieutenant Grand Governor because he said something very profound, and this is something that we should always keep in mind when we talk about what is our estate, being the creation of Allah, being the Khalifa, being the Lord of the plane of manifest. What is the principle of nationality, the power to define. And he said in his measure, one holy night, he said, what was the first order that Allah gave to Adam, gave to man? And that is to name each and every one of his creations. That is the power to define. That is the basis of nationality, because you're projecting your ideals to the world. And that is the very thing that our prophet has asked us to do. It is our responsibility to teach our people their nationality and their divine creed so they may know that they are part and a parcel of this their government and know that they are not Negro, black, and colored. So they can be known by the nations of the earth and this said government. Islam?
Islam, Sheik.
In the Moorish Science Temple of America, in this institution, we have delusions of grandeur, in a sense, because we come in just as our sister secretary said, and we come with these great ideas, and they are wonderful ideas. But when it comes down to the come down, and we realize that we have to do the work, we get discouraged and we get frustrated, and we start to exhibit these 5 principles, these 5 elements that I just spoke about. We start to exhibit the instability because we're frustrated. We're fed up. Why is it that we got to keep going over the chain? Why we have to keep running it up the chain? Why do we have to go through the pipeline? Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? Why can't we just do it? Because we're free. We're free men, right? But then, once we realize that there's an order to everything, we start to practice the instability and the inconstancy. We get upset. We stop showing up at the meetings because our passions come into play. And then we don't want to, we want to show them. We want to show, well, if I don't show up, then things won't get done. So on and so forth. And, that's a weakness. That's not only a weakness in the temple, but that's a weakness in yourself. One of the biggest responsibilities and the biggest charges as being a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America is to how to learn when to hold. Is to learn to obey. Islam?
Islam, Sheik.
I'm going to leave you with this, and then I'll yield the floor to our next speaker. Understand that in the Moorish Science Temple of America, we are in the business of making a wall brick by brick. We, in certain occasions, have to approach a thing because this Moorish movement is vast. We have to approach it one step at a time. So I encourage you, I challenge you, those that are members of the Moorish Science Temple of America that would like to improve and perpetuate this Moorish Divine and National movement, consider this. Consider not just trying to hurry up and put up a wall, but focus on making sure that you place this brick firmly the best way that you can, and so we can make sure that we have a strong foundation to continue to build this institution. Islam family?
Islam, Sheik.